My name's Cecile Hunt, and today we're recording some memories of World War One. And your name is?
My name is Carol Harris. They're not actually personal photographs, but they're photographs that have come from the Winchcombe Museum, from a private collection of photographs there. During the First World War, Winchcombe had a Red Cross Hospital, a very small one, on two sites in the middle of the town, and presumably as the soldiers were recovering they were getting quite bored, and there were a number of people in the town who enjoyed amateur dramatics, and so these are photographs of some of the dramatics which they performed. The first one was taken, it's certainly published at the beginning of 1916. It must have been the pantomime for that Christmas, and it was Cinderella. We actually know who the players were because it comes from the photograph album of Eliza Wedgwood, the hospital commandant, and she listed them all underneath. The first name at the back is Frank. We know he was Frank Adlard. The Adlards were great friends. They ran the paper mill and were great benefactors to the town, and they regularly invited the soldiers to their home. And the young lady sitting second in the middle row on the left is his wife Kate, who's actually an American. And Frank and Kate regularly entertained the soldiers and took part in the amateur dramatics. The tall soldier in the middle was the vicar, who was William Elliot. He was persuaded to join in. And we have been able to establish from autograph albums and from records who the other soldiers were. We've sometimes got much better photographs of them. The young lad at the front on the right, for example, Private Chesterman, we discovered his admission date and the fact that he was a bugler, because when one of the Sudeley Castle house servants died, who was an ex-marine, Private Chesterman played the bugle at his funeral. We also know next to Kate is Dorothy Halliwell, who was the doctor's daughter, and next to her the vicar's wife. It's quite interesting because some of the characters in the play came from quite wealthy families. Doris Stott, for example, who's at the right-hand end of the middle row, was a daughter of Philip Stott of Stanton, who actually owned the village. And these people are professional and wealthy, members of wealthy families actually acting with privates. The next picture shows a later production of Bluebeard. There are various pictures of that. The lady in the middle, who understandably gets the role of the princess, was Lady Mary Charteris, who was the daughter of the Earl of Wemyss, and she was also a volunteer at the hospital. But as you see, she's acting with privates. Private Chesterman, obviously a very keen amateur dramatic performer, because he also appears in Bluebeard, which suggests he was quite a long-term patient at the hospital, and also terribly keen on amateur dramatics. We have been looking at the admission list, because the original admission lists have been destroyed, but we can find a lot of admission dates from newspapers. The very handsome chap on the extreme right in Bluebeard, for example, in the newspaper photograph, was a Sergeant Pywell. We did hear that there was an objection to soldiers dressing up in the way that they have done in these photographs. An old man called Bert Butler many years later wrote his memories, and he remembered what he called a War Office killjoy, getting up on the platform and announcing that this practice had to stop. But the information we have from our photograph albums suggests that nobody took any notice, because, again, looking at the admission dates of some of the soldiers, we know that these performances were going on quite late in 1917.
Did you find in all of your research, because it sounds as though there's an awful lot of research gone on here, were any of the soldiers local, or did they just come to the hospital because that was the hospital that would treat them?
Well, the system was that they arrived in Bristol. Winchcombe Hospital was Cheltenham number 6. It was part of the group. And they would simply arrive at Bristol. Cheltenham phoned through to say how many beds we had, and then they would then bus to Cheltenham. The local transport officer then distributed them. And certainly before the end of 1916, they were all British soldiers. They were all other ranks. We did not entertain officers, which perhaps makes the social mix in the photographs even more surprising. And they were just whoever needed care. Great range of ages, ranks, regiments. The first Australian didn't come until the end of 1916, and then sometimes a whole consignment was Australians, like, for example, after some of the battles at Passchendaele, they were all fighting together, the various Australian battalions, and they simply arrived together. The local people at first some of them had been quite distressed at the prospect, all these totally strange young men appearing in what had been quite an isolated small town. But there was some very acrimonious correspondence in the newspapers. But after that, they seem to have taken to it with great enthusiasm.
And I would imagine they missed them when they went as well.
Well, I think they did. Life was probably extremely quiet. I did talk to one old lady who's now about 109, but at the time she remembered that with all the young soldiers departing the town, the young ladies of the town were only too pleased to see wounded heroes turning up. And the commandant got quite upset when she found them lying up on the pavement opposite the hospital and was very keen to entertain wives and regular girlfriends and anybody who could come to visit.
Sounds a very interesting subject, and obviously a lot of information there still to be found, probably. Well, thank you very much. And we'll end it there. Thank you.